Button is pressed.
Hello, welcome everyone to this TalkShop webinar where we welcome Kerry. Forgotten your second name, Kerry Turner. I've known Kerry for several years, having met her at meetings at SCIO, a group of people practicing systems thinking in their work. In our occasional catch-ups, I've come to admire what she does and to respect what she has to say. Many people have different ideas about what systems thinking is. For me, it's about holistic thinking and about paying more attention to the relationships between things than the things between themselves. But I'll say no more, I'm just a novice. Kerry has much experience in bringing about change in the business world, and she's now using this in her work with children. I'm very excited to hear what she's got to say, and I hope you will be too. Kerry, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can we all see this?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm Kerry Turner, and today I'm going to be introducing you to See the Systems, a new educational system based on an international competition. And the way that I'm going to do that is in several stages. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. Bob's already made an introduction, but some more details. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about systems, and in particular, one particular systems approach that I use, which is system dynamics. I'm then going to talk about a project that I started back in 2018, which I called ST 2050, short for Systems Thinking 2050, a project where I was looking to bring systems and system dynamics to children in schools. I'm going to touch briefly on a competition that currently exists called Map the System, which is run by Oxford University. And then I'm going to talk about how See the Systems relates to that. And then finally, I'm going to try and encourage you all to get involved with me and see the systems in various ways. So this is me, my life in logos. And I always think, where do I start when I'm asked to talk about who I am? And I nearly always start with university, despite the fact that I'm sitting in the bedroom where I grew up for the first 18 years of my life, up to 1981. So I was 4 years at Lancaster. I did a first degree in maths and a master's degree in operational research. And operational research is maths for business. Back in 1985, it was kind of the dawn of consulting as a profession. A lot of the audit practices, the accountants, were spawning business advisory services as a part of their offer. And I joined Deloitte Haskins and Sells in London. And I joined a group called Business Dynamics, which was the brainchild of a very clever man called Dennis Sherwood. And his big idea was that we were going to take the best analytical approaches coming out of universities around the world and make them applicable to business. And in particular, we were going to be doing what he called business modeling, because at that time, personal computers were becoming available and more businesses were employing them. So it was the dawn of all sorts of things back in 1985. And I got incredibly lucky joining that group. I always said it was like I left university and I joined the best university in the world, because we were working on massive projects, really big questions that our clients had. And I think it was in 1987 that I was to come across system dynamics. Dennis had spotted somebody in the United States called Barry Richmond. And Barry Richmond had been a PhD student of Jay Forrester at MIT. Now, not many people know this, but Jay Forrester was an incredible man, a very, very creative man. And he was one of the people that created RAM, random access memory, without which we wouldn't be using any of these devices that we're currently using. And of course, without which there would not have been any personal computers. And then Jay Forrester created system dynamics because he got very curious about the way that the world works. And what he did was he created a language through which he could create a model of the world and have it sitting on his computer. so that he could look at different ways of interacting with that world and ask big what if questions. And the first model that brought Jay Forrester to the world was really the one that he called World One. It was a model literally of the whole world. And that model was incredibly elegant, with just population, renewable and non-renewable resources, pollution, public health, just really, really high level variables and the interactions between them. And he wrote a paper back in 1971 called The Counterintuitive Behavior of Social Systems. And that was kind of a big warning to the world, that paper. He took it to the Club of Rome as well, to talk about the big problems that we were going to be heading into down the line if we carried on in the way that we were going, okay? So that was Jay, and my boss spotted Barry, and Barry spotted something about system dynamics that was very important. And it was this, it was that it would never take off while ever there were no user-friendly software packages to support it. So he finished at MIT and started a small company called High Performance Systems. He got some seed money from what was then a very small Apple computers. And he created the world's first user-friendly system dynamics package, which was called Stella. And it ran on a Mac, because that's what Apple had specified. It must only run on a Mac. And my boss bought an Apple Macintosh, and he brought Barry over from the States to London. And I did a week-long training course on system dynamics. And it was like I'd seen the light, okay? The first model that I built in system dynamics was a model of the CFCs rising up and creating holes in the ozone layer. Because at that point, that's what we were worried about in terms of climate change in the 80s. And in true consulting style, I finished the training course on Friday evening and started at my first client building a system dynamics model on a Monday morning, and that was Marks and Spencer. And I went there to build a system dynamics model of their whole organization. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot through that experience. I learned that to be an expert, you only need to stay about 1 second ahead. And I managed to do that and train a number of the client staff in how to do system dynamics as well. So that was kind of a baptism by fire. But then I went on to apply system dynamics approaches to a vast range of clients. I never, ever chose to specialize. So I've worked in virtually every sector and function in corporations, and many, many big corporations around the world. I've also worked in virtually every UK government department. And I stayed with my group for 20 years. I've only ever had one employer. But actually, I've worked with, as I've already said, a vast range of organizations. I've seen far more organizations in that 20 years than I think most people would see in a life, well, definitely not see in a lifetime. And my organization changed around me. So Deloitte grew, and then we merged. We merged first of all with Coopers, and we became Coopers Deloitte. And then we merged with Price Waterhouse, and we became Price Waterhouse Coopers. And then back in 2002, PwC Consulting was separated and sold to IBM Business Services. So I've only really ever had one job, but I've had a lot of different employers, but purely through mergers. Now, what happened to me was interesting. IBM and my values did not coincide. Let's put it that way. And I decided to take a career break to think about what I was going to do about that, because, you know, I loved my work and I loved my job. But I'd also got a few problems with my job by then, having seen so many different corporations and seeing what they were doing. And essentially, I was a part of it, because everything that I did was about helping make corporations deliver shareholder value, and to do that in more and more creative ways. But actually, it wasn't real systems thinking, because what we did as consultants is we applied systems approaches to optimize parts. So it was never, ever true systems thinking, because to do that, you've got to consider the whole. And so I'd had problems with IBM's ways of working, and I had problems with consulting as a profession. And also had problems with the whole world of work, because I kept simulating in my mind what was happening in terms of what we were doing with corporations and seeing the way it was going and thinking, I get paid a hell of a lot of money to ruin everything, was essentially where I got to. So I took my career break and I went to France on a holiday, and I made a massive discovery. I discovered that if I sold my house in the UK and moved to France, then I didn't have to work for IBM anymore. In fact, I didn't have to work for any other corporations. I could afford to retire and not be involved in that world anymore. And it was massive for me, that realization. Now, when I tell people that, they always think I'd got some great pension or some source of income. No, I didn't. I didn't at all. I put the money that I realized, the gap between property prices in the UK and France, and put it in the bank, and then divided it up and decided that's what I've got to live on for the rest of my life. So I could afford to live like a pauper. Yeah. But I mean, it's very interesting doing that. You can get very creative when you've got limited resources. And I learned all sorts of things, like, for example, fresh air doesn't cost anything. You know, water doesn't cost very much. The food really doesn't cost very much. And I moved to France and started having a lot of time, something I'd not had in the last 20 years. Because if you're a consultant, it's kind of a lifestyle choice. You know, you're either 100% in or 100% out. And suddenly I started applying everything I'd learned about systems to every single part of my life. So I've got some horses. You can probably see them on the wall at the back there. And I'd been taught to ride in a certain way. And I got to thinking about what if nobody had ever taught me to ride? What if I'd seen a horse and I'd thought about system dynamics and thought about how I would approach training and riding my horse in a different way from scratch? And I did a lot of experiments, and I wrote a book called Riding Dynamics. And that's still available. I've got a few hard copies available, but now I've got it online. You can download and look at it for free. It's a book that's about merging two different systems, a horse system and a person system, and what happens when you combine those and connect them and create unity. Because when you create unity, you create massive emergent properties that aren't present when you haven't achieved that level of connection. So whilst it's a book about horses, it's not really. It's a book about connecting with any system. And I went on then to explore other systems. So I explored swimming. I thought about swimming and how I'd been taught to swim, and whether it really was about having unity with water, and how would I swim if I wanted to achieve unity with water. And I started doing this with every part of my life, with my relationships, with my health, with my home. In absolutely everything I did, I've applied system dynamics to it. And I kept coming up with this same question. Why wasn't I taught this at school? This thing that enables me to be more effective in absolutely every aspect of my life, I was never taught, and indeed children now are still not being taught how to do this. How to think, how to learn, and how to make better choices. Because if you've got that, if you've got those things, you can learn about anything. And if you haven't, you just find the whole world an incredibly complicated place that you can't understand. And you become a victim of it. Okay, so I decided to do something about that. And the first thing I want to do, though, is to tell you a little bit about what I mean by systems, because that word can mean a multiplicity of different things to different people. And what I mean by system is it's a set of parts which interact with each other to function as a whole. Yeah. So this person here running is a system. And we talked about the emergent properties. There are emergent properties in all of us. I'm talking now, that's an emergent property. If you look in my system and look at the parts, it's not a property of any single part in my system. This guy that's running is an emergent property. My ability to swim or ride my horse is an emergent property. Okay, so this is a really important concept. If I were to chop this man up into the component parts that we see, this heap of parts on the left, the system wouldn't exist anymore. Yeah, we finish the system. The connections make the system. It's really, really crucial. And we talk about systems, but actually there is really only one system, and that is the whole. Everything else is a subsystem. So I am a subsystem. I'm a member of another larger subsystem called Yorkshire, yeah, which in turn is a member of a larger subsystem called the UK, and in turn planet Earth, and in turn the universe, whatever that might be. So basically, what we look at all the time are components. We see components, and we're animals that are really predominated by our eyesight and what we see. But what makes a system strong, as we've already seen, is the connections, and we do not see the connections. Yeah, they're not seen. They're things that are hidden, and yet they're absolutely crucial. So, you know, I'm hoping one day to be able to get on that plane back to America. But if I were to turn up at the airport and be told that the plane I was about to board was made of the best parts in the world, but that the airline had run out of money and fastened them together with pieces of string, I wouldn't want to get on that aircraft. And yet, that's a really good metaphor for a lot of the systems that I've seen in my life. And connections are absolutely crucial to strong systems. Just one final thing about systems, and in particular system dynamics. What system dynamics tells us is that the structure of a system will determine its behavior. So I've got a little example here. This is a guy called Fred. He's a friend of mine. He travels around with me, and he likes to stand in this system of 2 dominoes. And the big question that he's always asking himself is, how can I make some more space for myself? And standing where he's standing, he thinks it's a great idea to push over that domino in front of him. From where we're standing, things might look slightly different. So what's going to happen? Anybody like to tell me what they think is going to happen?
There'll be a knock-on effect.
Yeah, so what's going to happen to Fred?
It'll be a knockover effect.
Oh, yeah, he'll get knocked over.
He'll get knocked over. Okay. So we see from our position something he can't see. Yeah.
Yeah.
We see interactions, we see interrelationships, we see the components, of course, but we also can simulate in our minds what's going to happen. That's because a lot of us have played with dominoes in this way in the past when we were children. Now, what would you say to Fred about what he could do differently in order to create space for himself?
Physical space, he could move into the circle.
He could move inside. Anything else?
You can move off the pink circle.
He could move outside. What if he can't move from that position?
Take a look round the corner.
He needs to push the left-hand one and then push the right-hand one over before the knock-on effects get around the circle.
Yes, yeah. So he could turn sideways and push both.
Yes.
At the same time. Okay. Now, what we're seeing is that when we're able to stand back from a system, see the components and the relationships between them, we start to open up options. We start to open up other options for ourselves for being more creative within an existing system, or even we can start to create new structure within a system that better suits what we want. Okay. That's not present when we believe that we're in a system like the guy at the top where he is there. We can't do it because we're very, very limited. Now, when I ask this question about what's going to happen to Fred, what a lot of people say is he's going to get crushed. Okay, you said he's going to get knocked over. Yeah. But the crushing is an interesting thing because it involves another assumption. What assumption does that involve about this system for him to be crushed?
That he
That
doesn't
he-
move.
That he doesn't move? Anything else?
That he's weak, not strong enough to change the system.
No. I think it's something about these dominoes.
Well, the domino effect actually works.
That's one. And do you know what? It's really interesting because I've got a packet of dominoes and I've got a little Paddington bear. I'll show you him. He travels with me to kids in schools. So he comes, he's quite small and he sits amongst the dominoes and we set it up. And the kids are desperate to find out what happens. And eventually I let them do it. And sometimes what they expect to happen doesn't. Because there are things about the way that the speed and interaction works that means that something hits something and it goes off in a different direction than you'd expect. So it could be that that last domino never ever reaches him, but there's something else in that crushing, another assumption. What if these dominoes were made of polystyrene?
Ah, good point.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of things, assumptions that we make about systems based on our past experience, based on what we want to believe, that often we are just not aware of. And the key thing is making structure explicit and continuously challenging your understanding of that structure to understand a system. Because to get creative within a system, you have to be able to understand all of these different aspects of a system. Yeah. And I hope that this has illustrated that. And essentially that's what system dynamics is about. It just gives us a toolkit, a set of different tools for making a system structure explicit. So we can share it with others. Often, you know, it's about having a team working together. If we want to go anywhere together as a team, we need a really clear map of the ground and a really clear route through that map. And it has to be shared. And if we don't have that, it's very, very difficult to navigate our futures. So this is again why I'm really, really passionate about this. And the great thing about it is it's incredibly simple. Yeah, you don't have to be Einstein to learn this language. Once you have a given language, in this case, our language here is English, but you could do it in French, you can do it in German, you can do it in Chinese, you could do it in any language. And it's incredibly simple. My task today is not to take you through that language. Rather, I want to tell you more about my projects, because this sort of thinking is absolutely critical to being effective in the world. It's critical to being creative in the world, and it's critical to collaboration. And all of those things are critical to our survival because we have a lot of big problems out there. And actually, the way that I see them is not as problems at all. I see them as symptoms. And I see them as symptoms of one really big problem. And that is this, that we do not understand systems. We are not taught to think in systems. And until we do, we will continually create more and more problems. So rather than trying to fix climate change or problems with the environment or all the other problems that we've created, unless we also fix this problem, just something else will burst out somewhere else at another point in the system or another point in time. Okay, that's my hypothesis. So I decided to try and do something about this in the UK back in 2018. The first thing I did was I signed up to do a PhD at the University of Hull, not because I wanted a PhD, but because I wanted to get cover. It's really difficult to get into UK schools. It's difficult to get into schools anywhere. So I thought, with the cover of a university, I can say I'm a researcher, I've got a university email address, I've got a reason for turning up. And then I got myself some other covers. I went to the Operational Research Society because I've been a member of theirs since leaving university. And they have an OR in schools program, which again, let me get into certain schools. And then the other one I did was the STEM Ambassador Scheme. The UK has a STEM Ambassador Scheme. Basically, people like me that have worked with STEM subjects in their careers go into schools and inspire children. Well, I never went in to inspire them to become consultants. I went in to tell them all about systems. So through the OR program, I talked about systems. Through the STEM program, I talked about systems. And wherever I could get into it as a researcher, I talked about systems in schools. And I started off at a school not far down the road from here, a place called Chapeltown, just outside Sheffield. There's a sixth form college there, and I did a lot of experiments with those children. The idea being to try and work out what would turn children on to this. So rather than walking in and teaching techniques, which is why I stopped short and I've not taught you any techniques, how do I grab their interest? What would make them sit up and spend time with me rather than in their classes? So that was very, very interesting. And I'll come on to some of the conclusions in a moment. I started working in Hull with Hull and East Yorkshire Children's University. Now they work with primary schools in the Hull area. And I created a project. We called it a systems thinking experience, where we took children aged 10 and 11 years out of school to a business location. I got a business in Hull involved, and I got some money from an education trust. And we devised a game that took place in that place where they became agents of change in the business, basically, for a day. We did the beta test of that just before the first lockdown last year. I worked with this school, St Ebe's School, which is in Oxford. Now, Bob, when I met you through SIO, I also met a guy called Steve Whitler at SIO. He runs a consultancy called Visual Meaning, and his children are at this school. And he came up to me at the end of a presentation I'd given, and he said, I'm governor, I'm the head of the board of governors at this school, and my 3 kids are there. I'd like you to come. I'd like my school to be systemic. Okay, so I started working in this school as well, and I'm still working in this school. It's the single school that I'm still working with in the UK, and I've continued to do so, because the other area I got involved in was homeschooling, home education. Now that was really interesting, because suddenly, instead of having kids all the same age and with a teacher, what I had in this case was kids of all sorts of ages and their parents all together learning. And that was really, really mind-changing for me. I saw the power of being able to do that and of having adults learning at the same time as children. I also started to question myself and say, why am I limiting myself to the UK? Why don't I go to other countries? And in 2019, I was called to go to India. And I worked at Bangalore International School, teaching children from, the youngest was about 10, the eldest about 17, again, system dynamics. And I did a lot of work trying to get systems onto the curriculum here in the UK. So I went to all the exam boards. I tried to get them to create a new examination, a new subject. They wouldn't. I tried to get it incorporated in other subjects. I was making some progress with geography, partly because of the interest in climate change, but all subjects are systemic. All subjects are systemic. And if you learn systems, you can learn about any subject incredibly quickly, because the same structures apply, just in different settings. And it makes you an astronomically fast learner. Now, my other big idea was that I was going to create an evaluation study. So I was going to take some children and teach them systemically, and then others leave them in the normal system. And then I was going to measure the long-term impacts on their outcomes in life. And I was going to use that, because I know what would happen. I was going to use that to try and leverage the UK government to change education. Ha, ha, ha. Okay. And then when I started my PhD, I realized that I'd got a big problem, because to have a platinum grade evaluation study, you can't evaluate yourself. And yet I was the only one doing this. So I had to go and look for other programs. And I found 2 programs. The first program was with Shell. Shell run an international program as part of their CSR called N-Explorers. And what they do is they teach groups of 14 to 18-year-olds around the world a suite of systems approaches that they use themselves, Shell, within their strategy and performance management. And this is all in poverty-stricken areas around the world, is what they do. So I thought, great, I've got an international program here where I can start to go and evaluate. And I found another program. I did a lot of work with Peter Senge at various times in my career. And he'd started a program called Compassionate Systems, working with, this was like the opposite end from Shell and Explorers, working at top end. So only big top-end international schools, yeah, with big price tickets. So the teachers that participate in his program have to have a lot of money within their school to be able to participate. So it's kind of the other end of the scale. So I had these two programs, and essentially that's what I was doing before lockdown. And I've got all of this all written up within my FedWiki pages, you know, so anybody who wants to look at all of that work, you can find it there. And then 2020 came and I was horrified because suddenly I couldn't do anything. Everything that I was doing stopped. And that gave me a chance to really think about what I was doing. And these are the things that I wrote down when I reflected on it. That really, you know, any sort of evaluation study of education, but in particular, a PhD evaluation study was not going to change that world. It wasn't going to change anybody's world. I'd found a massive disconnect between the world of academia and the real world of work, be it at university, where I was myself, or indeed in schools. The fact that I can't evaluate myself, the fact that, and I discovered this everywhere, that once a child gets to 14 years old, the culture is so strong with their parents and teachers telling them that they must focus on their qualifications, and then them walking away from me because I couldn't give them any of those things. I couldn't give them a qualification. I couldn't give them any proof of worth. I had one boy that it really struck me, and that was at the original school, Chapeltown Academy. And he stayed with me for a long, long time when all his friends left and stopped seeing me. And I asked him, why have you stayed when all the others have left? And he said, because you're teaching me something that's far more valuable than anything I'm learning in this place. And he said, I've quit. He said, I've quit my chemistry A level so I can spend some time with you because it's more important. But those sorts of children that think that way are few and far between, and that are able to make those sorts of choices at that age are few and far between. Most of them succumb to the pressure of their parents, their peers, and their teachers. Involving parents works really well. You know, the people that I work with at home school, it was great having the parents there learning about systems as well. Engagement is key. So instead of walking in to talk about systems, all I do with any children, in fact, anybody, is ask them, what is it that they care about? What are the things that they value, the things that turn them on? And then when you found that thing, if you overlay systems with that thing, that's when they really engage in systems, when they see it has the power to deliver something for them that they care about. Single workshops or days out of school have limited impact. There's got to be ongoing support, especially for children that are being told by everybody else that they're crazy to do this. Primary schools with committed head teachers are opportunities. It's why I still work with St. Ebes, because one day I think that she'll stand out as a lighthouse school in the UK. And you know, that is the big opportunity. Not that I stand up and say this, but that she does, and that other head teachers see it. And then the final thing I realized was that everything I was doing was actually would only have made the education system do the wrong thing righter. And that's still wronger. And so really, me stopping was a great thing. And I did nothing from March last year through to March this year. And then in March, it was Steve again that reached out to me. He said, would you be interested in running some webinars for Map the System? Now, Map the System is a competition run by Oxford University Said Business School. It's for students, okay? And so your university has to be a member of Map the System. There's a big entry fee, but once your university has joined, then as many teams as would like to compete can compete. And essentially what they do is this. I have a model that I use that I call the 4 eyes. So 4 eyes, seeing, but they're actually 4 words beginning with the letter I. And Map the System is about the first 3 eyes. So my first eye is impact, which is basically having a system that I'm interested in. Yeah. So what am I observing? I've noticed something that is bothering me or that I want to make happen. The next eye is in interactions, where I say, okay, well, I've noticed this. What's actually causing it? What are all those interactions like we saw with Fred in the dominoes? Okay. And then the next eye is using that to get insight, to be able to see the places that we can intervene within the system and what might be the consequences of those interventions. Okay, so starting to see where I could have agency within that system. Now, map the system is about these 3 I's: deciding on a system, mapping it, and then coming up with some ideas of change. There is no change to the real world. It's an analytical exercise, an intellectual exercise. But it gave me an idea. And the idea was this: what if we were actually able to get young people involved in going the whole way around the 4 I cycle? So instead of just coming up with an idea, instead working out how to create an experiment in reality, running that experiment and measuring the results, evaluating the impact, and then ideally committing to doing that on an ongoing basis, within a system. Because when you do that, what you've got is you've got intelligent action. And what you've got is you've got people that understand that, like we talked about Fred and the dominoes, when they push that domino over, we never really know what's going to happen. We can think that we know in our mind, but often we just don't see until we experiment, and we learn by experiencing, by going out there and doing it. And that's what's currently really missing from education in its broadest sense of the word right now. You know, children are really closed off to agency and being able to do anything. Okay, so William Blake, I take my courage. He said this many years ago: I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. And I see many, many adults enslaved in systems in the way that I was enslaved, you know, at least to begin with, for the first 20 years of my life. And in the way that I realize many, many children are now, and many people. I used to talk about Turner's law, and Turner's law was this: that no adult will trash a system that they believe they depend on for a living. They just won't do it. And I saw it time and time again in my consulting career as well, which is why I wanted this to be about children, because they've got a choice to make. And it's a big choice about whether they choose to support some of the existing systems that we have that are creating a lot of problems, or whether they choose to do something different. Yeah. And that's why seeing systems is so important. And it's why I came up with this idea of a new international competition, which it's based on Map the System as a concept, but it has a much bigger reach. So let me talk about that. So Map the System is only for 18 plus students in universities. I want to see the system to extend that. There'd be another category which would be for under 18s, maybe split into teenagers and younger children, but certainly children. And then another category which would be completely open. So anybody, anywhere in the world can get involved in this competition, form a team and compete. The next thing is the prizes and criteria. I think I've already said that Map the System is purely for those first 3 I's. It's for analysis. What I want the prize structure to be around is around the 4 I's, going out there and intervening in a system. Okay. So what I'm imagining maybe a school, a group of children in a school, deciding to map the system that is their school and their school's community. And then thinking about what can we do within this to make this community a better place, our school and our community. And how are we going to set up that experiment, and how are we going to measure it? Okay. So we start to get children really interested, not just in the idea of systems existing and how you might look at them, but how you can actually interact with them and create real change. And how we're going to fund these prizes? Well, I've been doing a lot of reaching out to organizations, my old corporate clients, because if they were to invest in this, there's a really good reason for them to do that. And I don't just mean money. A lot of them, I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for time and other prizes that have more value than money to young people, that's within their agency to give. You know, so imagine children that have been through this experience on a repeated basis. These are the sort of people that a lot of the corporations ultimately would like to employ. Yeah, and it's not what the current education system is doing. At the moment, Map the System has no community of participation. People compete with very little support. So what I want to do, I want to create a community of participation where all the teams can interact and learn from each other about what they've learned from their area. Yeah, and the prize structure would reflect that and encourage it. And the support, well, I'm going to get support from several organisations and platforms. In terms of the organisations, there's a lot of big systems organisations that have older retired people that could give time to help mentor some of these young people to create this change that we're looking for. Yeah, so it's about intergenerational mentoring, really, I'm looking at here. And then also there are certain platforms that are available, platforms that I've become aware of that support mutual learning and sharing, like the FedWiki community. I could see all of the teams having their own individual FedWiki so that they can interact and learn from each other. So good software tools that support this sort of thing are now available in a way that they weren't before. Advocacy, I'm going to need a lot of schools and other associations with children to get involved. And luckily, I've done a lot of that networking already as part of my ST 2050 project. So the idea is that a lot of these have huge schools networks. For example, Educate Global in the UK has 349,000 schools worldwide in their network. You know, so imagine being able to engage all those schools in this competition. Publicity, interestingly enough, some men have suggested this. They've said, why don't you make it purely female in the first year, just to make a point? I said, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe, you know, it's not so inclusive, it doesn't feel systemic, but maybe we could have a female prize. I'm not sure, but, you know, certainly it's one way of grabbing some publicity, being able to explain about that. But ultimately, where this is all coming to is about creating benefits for society. Yeah, because if we do that, then actually what we'll have is we'll have lots of ordinary people on the streets aware of systems, and not just aware of it, but aware of the value that it brings for them in their area, in their community. And when we have that, we have something that's incredibly powerful, because actually we have systems on the curriculum, not the curriculum in the schools, but the real curriculum that matters, which is our culture. And having done it that way, ultimately, the education system will have to change. Yeah, it'll have to change. And instead of it being a top-down intervention, as I'd originally thought, I think it's going to be a bottom-up intervention. It's going to be this way. And then finally, this is what I'm devoting, you know, my life to at the moment, and I have done for a number of years. But not many people are going to do what I'm going to do and work 24/7 for absolutely nothing. Yeah, well, I do. I get a lot. I get a lot out of it, but I don't get what most people are looking for, which is money. So to get other people involved, certainly to get people involved in helping to run this structure, I am having to create some sort of a business model where some young people can get involved in running this and earn a living from it, so that I can afford to step away and retire and ride my horses again. So that's See the Systems. I've been engaging a number of organisations. The ones that you see on the left are already signed up. They already want to be involved in various ways. And then the ones on the right are ones that I'm in the process. I've got presentations lined up with them. They're people that want to be involved, that I've spoken to briefly, but have not yet been through the whole process. So I'm trying to make this not something that is new. I want as little that's new as possible. I want to have the same experience that I've had with my horse, but with multiple organisations. So what I want to do is bring them together in ways that are really creative and synergistic. And this organisation, for whatever it is purely going to be glue. It's purely going to be about holding these different parts together in a really highly connected way, so they can create this big emergent property of See the Systems. And then the final slide here, how can you get involved? Well, there's several things. I'm still networking and socialising a lot of this. But more and more, you know, the big, of course I have a model of this system myself that I'm trying to create. And some of the key components in it are mentors. It's absolutely critical, the mentor part of that, and the partnering part, because through partners, I'm generating more mentors as well. And then by helping either with time or funding. I mean, mainly time, actually, I've been asking people for, because personally, I feel time's far more valuable than money. And then finally, if you're interested and want to get involved or feel you can help in any way with this, here are my contact details. So my email address, my telephone number, and then a few of my Fed Wiki pages on this, on why I'm doing it, and on how See the Systems will function from a partner point of view. And that's really all I've got to say. So thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Kerry. Very inspiring. We wish you great success. Any questions, Kerry?
When's it starting?
It's already started.
Sorry.
Do you mean the start of the actual competition with participants? Yes. For the children? Okay, well, I've got, at the moment, I'm arranging trials. So one of the reasons I was going to the States is Oregon City wanted to do a trial with the schools in Oregon this summer. So it's a really well-defined small scale trial. I've also got the Operational Research Society and the STEM scheme in the UK. We want to come together and design an experiment here in the UK that would start, the person's coming into post in the next couple of weeks. And once they're in post, we're going to start talking about how to do that. And then the idea would be that hopefully we could start running it properly in the first year in 2022. That's my ambition.
Will you support children to educate their parents in systems thinking?
Yeah. We used to call it at work upwards management.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. In fact, a dear friend of mine, he talks about writing a book, you know, how to educate your parents, and maybe this will be one of the outcomes, that some of the children will write that book as a result of learning these things.
Yeah, I understand. I've got various sort of contacts and ideas and so on. Can I rattle through them?
Yeah, certainly.
There's a very interesting schools program called Learning to Lead, which comes out of Yeovil, I think.
Yeah.
And it's the most empowering approach to kids and education and giving them agency that I've come across.
Right.
And I do know the woman who set it up, although I've forgotten her name for the moment.
Would I find that online?
Yes. Okay. There may be several. Anyway, either you have a go and tell me if you can't find it, or I'll have a look and let you know.
Right.
So Gina is an interesting contact. So the new university, which is being set up in Hereford, which is called NMITE, N-M-I-T-E, is all about STEM, N-M-I-T-E.
Got it, yeah.
NMITE for short. So NM is the new model. And it's a new model for teaching STEM subjects based on an American model. I can't remember where from. And so I know it's not your age group so much, but I think they will be interested.
Right.
They are, I think it would have started, it would just have taken the first tranche of students. They've probably been put back because of the pandemic, but they're in that melting pot stage, which is when you want to reach an institution.
Yes, indeed.
So I can certainly send you Gina's email address. It's probably the best way to go.
Right, right. Do they have any connection with the new university in London, the London Interdisciplinary School?
Not that I've heard.
Right.
I didn't know about that.
Right. Okay.
There's somebody else I'll introduce you to called Mark Thomas, and he's not long retired from PA Consulting. He was head of strategy there, and he wrote a book called 99% and how we avoid mass impoverishment in the future. And so he's turned 99% into an organization running various projects, and one of them is a youth project about what young people want for their future and so on. And so I think he would be interested, and he would speak the same language, so I can introduce you to him.
Excellent, thank you.
Just on the business model side, Bob and I both took part in a French initiative called Climate Collage recently, and they've reached 125,000 people, which is quite good. Partly because particularly it's not very good actually. But the way they've done it is that a proportion of participants themselves become organizers and facilitators. That's how it's spread, and so that's interesting.
Yeah. Was that in French then? Were you
No. So Bob and I did it on different occasions. We did it in English, but the facilitators were from Mexico and.
Oh, okay. So it's an international initiative.
Very international.
Very,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that Talkshop is involved with is called the Assembly of Humans and More Than Humans. So I suppose that's a system in a way. So you can turn up and be a peat bog or a bat or a falcon or something, and explore whether a planning application for wind farms should be approved or not, and if so, if not,
oh,
what.
wonderful.
Yeah. And we did it with a prep school in London, in Notting Hill, and there's an absolutely outstanding teacher there who organized it, and he's so outstanding he's just resigned. It wasn't really working in a prep school wasn't really his view of education, so I'll introduce you to him as well, because he's special.
Okay.
I'll stop there, but there's a few thoughts.
That's great. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it.
Not at all.
Kerry, what help do you urgently need right now?
Urgently, there isn't anything that's very urgent. The one thing that I feel that's pressing for me, that's been on my mind a lot, is this whole area of a business model. Simply because, I've had such, creating a business model myself and thinking about what structure I want this to be. It's clearly going to have to be a not-for-profit, but there are so many different structures that you can establish for not-for-profit, and the whole thing of getting back involved in money and so on reminds me of being back when I was back in consulting and thinking about those things again. But I know I've got to do it. I know that I've got to find a way through that minefield, because it's not about me. It's about this new system, and it's going to need, despite me saying that I don't agree with the money system, it is the thing at the moment that everybody believes is real and is the thing that keeps the flows flowing. At the minute, it's kind of like the lifeblood of the whole system, isn't it? And for me to try and ignore it and not be a part of it is, it's going to probably make it very difficult for people to engage with me. So I want to find a way through that minefield that makes me feel happy ethically, because I want this to be very ethical. But also, gives young people a chance to be a part of this in a way that, that they can be a part, and it's not me expecting them to give their time and everything for free. And for example, the things that I've been talking about, I've been trying to avoid conversations about money with people that I'm partnering with, and it's been more exchanges. So it's been more, for example, with IBM, what will be really wonderful, and what they've kind of offered, you know, we've got to get it tied down on paper, is the whole idea that they let their employees have paid time off work for projects that are, you know, for charities or communities in their community. So they're going to make my project the project that they will be able to get engaged in. So I won't be paying them. They will be getting paid for this work, but not by me. Now that's a really creative way of engaging in money. That means that my organization is not paying people, but the people are getting paid. And, you know, that's one of the things that I'm trying to do where possible. But anybody's advice any advice that you could give me on that's very, very, would be very timely for me.
Kerry, do you know about all this lean and agile stuff?
Yes, yeah.
That seems to be the most useful way to think about business models.
Yes, and that's it's being able to be that flexible and to change and be environment contextual, agile. I love all of that stuff. I was thinking more of, you know, like the business angle of it. You know, what do I set up as a structure? There are so many choices about different structures. Does it matter?
No.
No.
So this is what I think. You know, so you know, the structure is definitely not the model, and the model comes first. And I would like to believe that out of the model comes an obvious structure.
Yeah.
So here's you might know this one, and in the back there's a list of 50 business models built on free.
Okay.
So and then yeah, there's this one as well.
Right.
You know, all good stuff.
Yeah.
All takes time to.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the 99% organization is a zero budget initiative. So
okay.
no, it's all. So that means that people are giving their time. You know, it's all done by volunteers.
Yeah.
But they've so far managed to avoid being part of the, you know, the money economy.
So do they have a formalized structure? You know, are they a CLG, something like that, a company limited by guarantee?
I don't know is the answer.
I'll see what I can find out about that.
Well, I'll introduce you to Mark, who runs it, and he, you know, he can tell you if
Great.
it's not evident.
Great, excellent.
So, apart from people who are paid by their organisation contributing, what do you think the business model might be?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I was looking at was I was imagining that either a school or a child, or more likely a parent, would contribute something, because of course these children are going to be being mentored. So even if it was only £1 a month, you know, that would multiplied up across many participants would make a lot of money. And the way that originally I'd thought about that, and then I was going to make it engaging and say that all of that money would go straight into the prize fund. So the more people, basically the more people that you get involved, the bigger the prize fund would be. These kinds of ideas that would be kind of self-sustaining.
I mean, I don't know if it's still around, but there used to be schemes where you could sponsor the education of a child in a poor country, that sort of thing. So it wouldn't necessarily be the child or their parent. It could be sponsored by somebody else, couldn't it?
It could, yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
What do you think, Bob? I'm talking too much.
Yeah, I haven't really got any strong ideas. I think probably there's some useful document somewhere which talks about the corporate structure, or the different non-profit making corporate structures there are. I'm not sure if I can find that. There's somebody I got training from who's from an organisation that charges pay as you feel.
Pay as you feel. Yeah.
And there may be something interesting there.
Yeah.
I'll look her name up and the organisation she was from.
I've got probably 4 minutes and then I'll have to go.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I think we've asked you some questions. We haven't really given you a great deal of support. I think we will now write to Abigail and introduce you.
Okay.
Harry and I will do that between us. Yeah.
Sure. Here's Martin joining for the last minute.
We gave Martin a free pass. He's on holiday in a caravan somewhere.
Oh, okay.
I think. Doesn't look like a caravan.
Hello, Martin.
We're just saying our goodbyes to Kerry because she needs to go.
Hello, Martin.
Can you
Hello.
hear us? Doesn't look like the internet's working very well there, does it?
Martin.
Hello.
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 Did you hear? I don't know if you heard Bob, but we're just saying. I'm sorry to say, we're just saying our goodbyes to Kerry.
Was it at 3:30?
Yes.
It was.
Okay.
Oh well.
Well.
Okay, well,
I just want to say to Kerry.
goodbye. Goodbye.
I'd just like to say to Kerry, thanks ever so much for going ahead, even though we had a very slim audience. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, and thank you for listening, and thank you for the great questions and ideas. It's really helpful. And I'd love it if you could send me a link to the recording.
Will do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I'll see you all again soon, I hope.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.